Hi, this is an excerpt from Degrees of Guilt by H.S. Chandler, otherwise known as Helen Fields. Maria rubbed the pale band of skin where her wedding and engagement rings used to sit. She could sunbathe for a decade, she thought, and the sickly whiteness would never tan. It was just one scar among many. The first sign that her life was destined to be lived in misery had been when Edward had chosen that ring. It was as good a place to start as any. She told the tale slowly, in plain terms. The memories, though, came hard and fast, knocking down the internal walls she'd spent years constructing. The retelling might be a gateway to madness, but even madness was preferable to numbness after so long. I was overwhelmed when he asked me to marry him, she said, choosing a spot on the wall to address. At 21, I had no close family, and Edward filled that gap. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. That was the whole truth, perhaps even an understatement. Edward was good at romance before we were married. He proposed to me in the Cotswolds. It was during a midnight picnic in a meadow, under the pretext of badger watching. Such a beautiful night. There was a lake on one side and a woodland copse on the other. I was head over heels. It was even a full moon. I'm not sure if he planned that, or it was a coincidence. Either way, it was magical. I remember it so clearly. He poured me wine, just half a glass. Edward didn't like women drinking too much. His own was full when he toasted us. He kissed me, told me I was perfect for him. Everything he'd spent his life looking for. At that stage, I was still stupid enough to believe he meant that in a good way. How do you think he meant it in hindsight? Newell asked. I know exactly how he meant it. He wanted someone naive. I was without family and easily impressed, almost alone, save for a couple of friends. He became the guiding influence in my life effortlessly. Edward wanted someone he could dominate. So he was right. I was perfect for him. Imogen Pascal leapt up. This is speculation and hypothesis. The defendant cannot be allowed to say whatever she likes about the motives of a man who is unable to respond. James Newell moved a few steps along counsel's bench to respond to her, stage whisper style. Sit down. Imogen Pascal glared at him, but she was reaching for her seat. Mr. Newell, the judge intervened, I was inclined to agree with you, only in a more polite fashion. This case is emotive enough without you two losing your tempers. Don't make me tell either of you again. And Miss Pascal, the defendant is answering a serious charge. You will allow her to do so without further interruption. Continue. If a line is crossed, I'll deal with it. Newell took a sip of water and pulled his gown back up over his shoulders. He managed to give Maria a reassuring nod before returning to his questions. You were telling the court about the night Dr. Bloxham proposed. Please, carry on. Yes, Maria said. Edward. She allowed herself to slip back to that night. The irony was that she'd thought it was the best night of her life, when actually it was the start of the end. He laid me back on the rug, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. Darling Maria, he said, I want you to know I'll dedicate myself to providing for your every need. I'll be your friend, your partner, lover, advisor, everything you need. I realised what was coming then, and I was amazed. Not that he was proposing, but that he'd chosen me. He had a PhD and I'd only passed A-levels. He was published, and he'd even been on television a couple of times. To me, he was a sort of celebrity. Edward had everything planned to the last detail. He'd taken the ring from the jeweller's box, I guess it came in, and fitted it into a geode. When I pulled the halves of the rock apart, the purple crystals glittering in the camping light. It sounds pathetic now, but I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It was like discovering an ancient treasure. Edward took my left hand and pushed the ring. It was a small diamond solitaire, because he said my fingers were so slight that a large stone would have looked clunky, onto my finger. Maria winced, remembering the pain it had caused. The band ground against my knuckle, grazing off a sliver of skin. My face must have showed the pain because he looked irritated with me and asked if I didn't like it. I told him I adored it and I meant it. I wanted to get married and I loved it, truly. I explained that the ring was a bit small, but that resizing it wouldn't be a big deal. He told me he'd asked the jeweller to make it tight, based on the size of another of my rings. His exact words were, "I never want it to slip off you. I don't want you to lose it, just like I never want to lose you. Hopefully, you feel the same." I told him I did, 100%. Rather than go against his wishes, I said I'd get used to the ring. I lost weight for years during our marriage. That ring was so small it never budged. During the summer months, my fingers would swell until I thought it would burst. "Did you ever ask if you have it resized?" Newell asked. Often, in the early years of our marriage. I learned by his moods that the suggestion was offensive to him. In the end, it was easier to put up with the pain from the ring than the emotional backlash of complaining about it. Read the rest of Degrees of Guilt on ebook or listen on audiobook, available from Amazon or elsewhere online. Thank you.